Welcome back to the Naswin Hockey Podcast. James Nichols and John Zella here as always. What's going on, pal?
Not a whole lot. I don't feel prepared today. I was telling you before we hit record, you have hockey brain. You're writing all the time. Stanley Cup's over. It's awarded. Vegas has it. Beat Florida in 5.
True.
And I feel like I just shut off. After our last show with the great Lighthouse Hockey folks, Dan and Mike, I feel like I'm not thinking about hockey. So I was trying to catch up today. So you might be a little faster than me. So I hope I can keep up.
Question for you regarding the Stanley Cup. So I was scouring through the, obviously always correct and accurate Twitterverse. And there was a lot of discourse as to whether or not the Islanders could have beaten both of those teams in the Stanley Cup final. What's your take?
Who was saying that?
Yeah, I saw some crazy threads that I was just like, wait a minute, what are we talking about here? Because Jack Eichel, Alex Pietrangelo, Mark Stone, I mean Jonathan Marchessault was just electric. Could they really could they have? And part of the argument was, yeah, Ilya Sorokin doesn't matter. He would have stopped them all. And I was like, not if it was 5-0 all the time, because that would have happened.
I mean, I think there's a few holes in the logic. You saw Sorokin break down in the first round. To a degree. We spoke about that last week, where there were some of those goals. The overtime goal was that, I don't even remember what game it was. Whatever. There was a couple overtime goals, some squeakers, some things that were very uncharacteristic of him. And clearly he was tired or something. He played a few more games in the regular season. They really rode him down the stretch, and I have a feeling that had something to do with that. I mean, he was also getting barraged, so that's number one. Who knows how tired he would have been continuing the playoffs? It may have been Varlamov. I don't know that you can necessarily have just penciled in Sorokin. Look at what the in the opposite way, the Florida Panthers, but they played their backup goalie for the start of it, and he kind of fell off, and then Bobrovsky comes in and saves the day. But eventually he wore down. He looked like shit in the final. I think the team in front of him also wore out. So I think the goaltending thing is number one. Let's be realistic here. We really don't know. And the other thing is, Florida swept the team that pretty much cleaned the Islanders off the ice in the first round. So I'm not entirely sure how that matches up. If you're saying a fresh Islanders team against one of those teams in the final, yeah, probably. I will never know that. I don't know that that's worth a conversation. If it was like a couple years ago where it was like against Montreal or something, yeah, I think that would have been safe to say that the Islanders would have beat Montreal in the final. I'm pretty confident in that. But the other year was Dallas, right? I don't know. I think that would have been a good series as far as the Islanders, like from an Islander fan perspective. I think fans and some media would have had a lot of fun with that at the time, discounting the Islanders for sure. This year, I don't know. They're a big team. They're a very big team. And Aiden Hill came up huge. It's really not about who's the better goalie. It's Aiden Hill showed up in a really big. Sergei Bobrovsky is better than Aiden Hill. I don't think there's a conversation really to be had. Aiden Hill won the series. He won them. He helped win them the series, and Bobrovsky couldn't stand on his head again. I think Florida got outshot most of the playoffs, right? So that was eventually, as we've seen with the Islanders, eventually just simply not going to work. If the offense isn't there, Kachuk is out for a game, he's getting worn down. Eventually, I think the magic stops, and if you don't have somebody else to step in, like they didn't have a second Kachuk. It's not like Barkov stepped up and started scoring all these crazy goals. Magic's going to wear out. I don't know that it's worth much more of a conversation. What did you seemed like you're along the lines of what I was what I said and
Yeah.
I'm thinking, or
Yeah, definitely. I don't understand how we can sit here and just pretend Like that's a thing. Like the look, the Golden Knights are an elite team. Like they have an elite number one center. The Islanders, they think they do. There's still questions there. The goaltending, sure, check Islanders. Everything else, check Golden Knights. And we saw what happened to the Islanders when all they had was the goaltending and everything else was outmatched, and they didn't make it past the first round of the playoffs. So, well,
Yeah.
I don't know what we're talking about here.
Yeah, outside of 4 minutes in game 3, 2, where the Islanders kinda come back and they score all those goals, they do win another game, right? Was it 4-1 or 4-2 in that series?
Um, I think it was 4-2. I think you're right. I think they
It
did win
it
a,
it
a
did
game in
not
that series.
it did not feel like that.
Hang on, I have it here. Yep, 4-2.
It didn't feel like that. It
No.
didn't feel like at any point. Now, okay, I'll take that back. There were shifts and parts, very small parts of games, single digit minutes worth of game time where the Islanders were the better team. They came out in the beginning of one of the games. I think it's probably the one they lost in overtime with this Scott Mayfield high stick. They came out and owned them. They just couldn't sustain it. That was an Islanders team that we saw. Was that game 2 or whatever it was? That was the Islanders team that we spoke about last week with Dan and Mike about that energy and tenacity that we saw a decade ago against the Penguins, right? Or that was starting to get built up even 2 years before that, where they had those teams were bad. I think it's right to own that, but they were starting to build something. There was a DNA. The last 2 years we really missed that. But there was at the beginning of that game until like it was until the Zach Parise penalty. Was that game 2? Whatever it was. Until that that was only a few minutes in and then they lose momentum. And that was part of that focus that we've been talking about where something is happening. They were not able to kind of get up for games or stay up for games. And that was another case of it where they just let the momentum get away from them. Then they were down 5-on-3. Hurricanes took advantage and that was the end of it. That may as well have been the end of the series. You just saw the life get sucked out of that team. Yeah, all the skill in the world on Vegas. They had one player under 6 foot, wound up winning the Conn Smythe. That's not everything, but that was a huge, no pun intended, reason why they won. They were just a big punishing team that could score a bunch of goals. Um, I don't know that you need to go down the roster player by player and say, oh, this player is better than that player. But looking at the end result, it was definitely tougher for the Islanders to match up against them at all.
Yeah, so definitely some interesting conversation regarding that. But no, I agree with you. I don't think the Islanders had what it took to take either of those teams in the final. Honestly, Matthew Tkachuk and the Florida Panthers kind of went on a roll there, got really hot, and yes, they couldn't do it against the Golden Knights, but they were definitely a tough team to run into. I mean, look who they beat on the way. So everyone. So some interesting news today. Islanders re-signed Samuel Bolduc to a 2-year, $800,000 contract. I'm sorry, 2-year, $1.6 million contract, $800,000 AAV. What was most interesting to me is that it's a one-way deal. We have a lot of trust in Bolduc, says Lambert. Right? He said that as um, following the deal. We've talked about his poise, he's got size, his reach. He does a lot of little things well, good stick positioning and things like that. He's done a good job. And I'm sorry, that was back in February. They now have Pellick, Romanov, Aho, and Bolduc for next season on the left side. So that's 4 defensemen, obviously left-handed. Is this a thing now where it becomes a 50-50 deployment with Sebastian Aho, or is Bolduc the 7th defenseman? Is Aho the 7th defenseman? Like, what's the outlook here now?
I think it's 50-50 on who takes that last roster spot. I don't know that it's one or the other. Um, you saw Aho out of the lineup here and there, but I don't know if he was injured or whatever the case was last season. Um, but I think it's just a toss up on who makes the roster. Bolduc definitely looked good. If he and Dobson just click, I think that's all she wrote, right? Aho and Dobson never quite clicked. Aho looked good. I don't think he doesn't have a spot. Um, I think there's just some things to kind of figure out. The Islanders, like a lot of teams in the NHL, have just deployed one of each for so long that it's easy to see that. But it's possible that at some point maybe Lambert is just going to put out his six best defensemen. That it's not just going to be about who can play what position. Maybe Aho's good at playing on his offside, but it may go back and forth. I just think it's 50-50 going into camp. From there, you'll see who's playing well with somebody. I don't even know that it means that one player is outplaying the other. It's how do the pairs look when they're putting them together? What are they seeing from both? Out of the different combinations, and that includes with Dobson. I don't think Dobson's going to be out of the lineup, and this could mean with or without Mayfield around. Um, if Mayfield's there, obviously they have 7, and that's tough because they need to add somewhere. And I know now that OEL has been bought out, that's definitely something that it has caught the Islanders' eye. Or the Islanders fans' eyes, or at least whatever, Twitter Islander country, whatever you want to call it. And I don't know if that's the right answer. I'm led to believe no. He's declined. At some point, he might have been the guy, but he also might be a lefty. I'm not entirely sure. Either way, it's interesting because they still want to add, in theory, a puck moving defenseman. I don't know that that's Bolduc necessarily. Now, they still need to add a winger, so they might just be kind of stacking up. This is kind of lose time a little bit, as we've said as I've said rather the last couple episodes. He's Lou's been better on the trade market. So if you're just kind of stacking up your D, which they don't have fantastic depth, Kurz wrote about that today. The Islanders don't have depth on D, especially NHL ready D. So you're probably riding with 7 one way or another. I don't know how you're making some kind of trade or what have you, but they need to bring in a winger, and I still think they need a defender that's a little bit higher skill than somebody in Aho who's still really trying to prove himself. Dobson, who needs to kind of bounce back after a strong first half or first few good months. Bolduc with really no NHL experience, and Mayfield that fits very neatly into one box of a type of defender and does not provide much else. Cannot clear the puck. Really, really struggles with um, getting the puck out and isn't really mobile, but he's a tough dude and he can penalty kill. So I don't really know what that means for the back end, honestly.
It's interesting that you brought up OEL, right? He's obviously, I believe he's a left shot defenseman. He's a puck mover. He feels like one of those guys who, a la Zach Parise, Lamoriello would go after. Is that something that you envisioned maybe Lamoriello doing? Maybe even hoped he would do, maybe to strengthen the blue line, add a little bit of experience. Although I don't know how much he's going to add in terms of playoff experience because has he been there? I don't think so.
He
Playing with
had one
Arizona.
he had 2 runs with
Okay,
Arizona. You remember one of his first seasons, they
that's
went on
true.
a pretty far run. Granted, that was 2011-12, so that's a very long time ago. And
Yeah.
Arizona made it in 1920, if you can believe it. And
Oh, it's part of
that's crazy. They played
the
9 games. The
bubble.
bubble, which is
Yeah.
crazy because I feel like they've just been like, remember in the 90s, it was like the Detroit Lions and all the like certain football teams, certain baseball teams, and like all these sports just had the Islanders, where it was just teams that were just bad. It seemed like they were just bad forever. And
Yeah.
with Arizona, it's like, oh, they've been bad for 15 years. And it's like, well, part of 15 years, but they've been, some of the players have been okay. That being said, um, before he left Arizona, so 2021, he had 24 points in 46 games. He hasn't hit 30 since 1920 in the shortened season. He's more of a half a point a game guy at this point. It seems He was not very good in Vancouver on a not very good team. He had 2 goals and 20 assists in 54 games. I don't know that he's the one. I understand the instinct, but he doesn't have the upside anymore that Parise does. Parise wasn't bad in um in Minnesota, right? And these are two players that weren't playing up to their contract in very different ways. Parise was still good. He just wasn't living up to whatever that contract, that ridiculous $13 million a year. OEL is really bad, right? He's not living up to what playoff hockey would look like, right? I don't see him as that kind of making that kind of impact anymore. And as we said, the left side's really, really full for the Islanders. I don't know what you do. Like I said before, are you going to start messing around with um, playing defenders on their offside? I don't know. I don't know if that this is all of a sudden you're going to start that after so long of putting yourself in a very specific box, like 6 seasons with Lamoriello and Lambert, Trotz. All of a sudden you're going to start making changes like that. I don't think so. Unless you're going to trade somebody. If you think that you can trade Aho and X thing for a winger, and then you can just sign OEL to play with Mayfield because he comes back on a cheap deal. I don't know how I feel about that. That's probably a really bad third pair. Their underlying numbers are probably freaking terrible, and putting them together would just be just like plummet that team. It would be an anchor on the defensive pairings there. I'm not sure how you make that work, honestly. I It doesn't seem like a good option to me. Even if you got a really good winger in a deal, I don't know what that looks like. Is Ottawa interested in Sebastian Aho and some prospect for DeBrincat? Probably not. I think that he's going to get way like they can get way more than that for him. And he's an RFA, so you're going to eat up some of those years, even if you sign him for long term. You're going to eat up some UFA years, although he's still pretty young. So I don't think that's the option for a couple reasons. To put that in a nice bow for you at the end.
Well, thank you for tying that up for me. I surely do appreciate it.
Don't be a
Um,
smartass. All right, enough. It's the off
uh,
season. We're trying to relax.
you do mention Mayfield though, right? Does this contract, in your opinion, affect Mayfield staying or not in terms of dollars? Right, fit obviously is there. He's a right-handed defenseman. They have 4 left-handed defensemen now, so that's not the factor here. But in terms of dollars, right? 800K, right? He's got some pretty, or meaning Lamorello has some pretty good contracts on the blue line, on the left side at decent cap hits. Does this help Scott Mayfield be able to stay, which Lamorello reportedly wants to do, wants to keep him, although he doesn't know if he'll be able to afford him. Does this allow him to now afford him?
It's weird because you just don't know what the the web looks like in Lamorello's brain of all the if then statements and the way that the dollars are working, who's available, who he's having conversations with, on his big board. I assume every GM has a big magnetic board in their office of players that they're kind of looking at. Who has he called about making a trade again? I think there's a lot, and we've said this before. I said it even earlier in the podcast. There's a lot of reason to not believe that Lamorello will sign a UFA. I think that's totally fine. Very legitimate. He's an offseason dud. There's a lot of reason to believe he'll make some kind of trade. Right? I'm not trying to get hopes up. I don't know maybe it's a really bad trade this time. He ruins the streak. He doesn't get somebody good. Fine. There's just a lot. I don't know if this necessarily has anything to do with whether or not Mayfield even gets a deal. I think it has to do with what Mayfield's number is in general. It may just be too rich, regardless if they can afford it or not. I think that's the same thing with Engvall. It has almost nothing to do with what kind of impact they can make. Is it too expensive? Is it going to allow us to do the other things we need to do? Engvall, I think you can stomach a little more just because of his age and the impact he made versus Scott Mayfield. And save me oh my God, the penalty killing thing and how he held onto that puck against the Carolina Hurricanes. There aren't the problem is there aren't too many of those plays that you can count for Mayfield making a big impact like that, and the Islanders need their defenseman to do that. Um, Again, long story short, I just don't know what the offense looked like for Lamoriello. That's kind of my problem. What else would he do with that money? You need another righty defenseman somewhere. Are you going to get that internally? I don't think that exists. I don't think there's depth there that they're going to trust. Bolduc is the young guy they're going to trust, who's 22, right? And Aho, I'm looking at now, is being paid $25,000 more. This is the last year of his deal, and he's 27. He could be some kind of trade chip for somebody. He's cheap. He's a lefty. He's not terribly old, but he doesn't fit in the Islanders' plans. That opens up a D spot. And Mayfield's also gone, so you're kind of saving that salary as well. You could go out and get somebody else. Maybe like a 25-year-old defenseman. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what kind of righty defenseman's out there, and try to run something. Um, I don't know that you give up on Aho, who had 1 or 2 seasons so far, maybe total of NHL experience. I don't know if you give up on somebody like that. Maybe you don't call it giving up. If you've seen enough, and you can move on. And however they play in the future is a different conversation. But I'm not sure the two things are mutually exclusive. Do you feel that they are?
It's a good question. I do wonder if feeling like Bolduc is ready, and giving him that cheap deal to like a hey approve it, finding ways to be able to you know cut down where you can and be able to afford a little more elsewhere in the lineup. That's a very Lamorello type thing, right? Bargain in one area of my roster so I can spend luxury in another. And I don't know how much of a luxury Scott Mayfield is. He's an excellent complementary player. He's an excellent third pairing defenseman, and he's surely due for a raise. I believe he can make $3.5 million a year. If he gets to open market, I wouldn't be surprised to see a team pay him for his size, his physicality, that type of stuff. Um, so we'll see, but I think there is a chance that the two things could be mutually exclusive, just in the sense that he's trying to be smart with his salary cap. Obviously we're still up against the COVID cap here, with where it's looking more and more every day like it's only going to go up $1 million, and I think that's what you know you go into next season understanding like the cap's not going up that much. The summer after, sure, but how can I plan accordingly and have the cheapest cap hits as possible, right? Because don't forget this is a 2-year deal moving forward, so that I can spend elsewhere and bolster where I need to. So it was definitely interesting to see the 1-year deal, because to me that said he's not going back down. We think he's ready.
One way deal.
I'm sorry, one way, not 1 year.
2 year,
2-year
one
deal,
way.
one-way contract. Thank you. You love correcting me on air, huh?
Oh, I'm not gonna wait until after. What are we gonna redub it in? Get out of here. I
Okay.
control I control the editing. All right. I you get
Yeah, yeah. Remaining RFAs are Oliver Wahlstrom for starters. And then following that is some depth there in Colin Adams, Blade Jenkins, Bodie Wild, who I think they shot him to the moon. He's gone. And Jakub Skarik. So, those contracts will sort themselves out after Wallstrom. You're not going to see anything too significant between Adams, Jenkins, Wild, and Skarik. The Oliver Wallstrom one for me is interesting though. I think I've been on the record before to say he's probably going to do something short term, approve a deal, and make his money later. It probably works out for him too, in the sense that the cap hasn't gone up, and if he can bet on himself and succeed, he'll make more money. When the cap finally does rise, I think it's supposed to be somewhere close to possibly 90 million next summer, which is was an interesting thing I think Frank Saravalli had today. But what do you see Oliver Wallstrom signing for? I know he's just been so inconsistent that can he even garner anything, I don't know, above $2 million bucks?
At this point, I don't think so, and I've seen the reports, and I've heard other people talking about it. Until I see it, I'm not convinced of the NHL raising that salary cap a ton of money in the summer of 2024. I think we really need to. I'll see it. I'll believe it when I see it, kind of thing. Um, Bettman's still fighting over tooth and nail for the remaining money that the players owe in escrow and this and that. So I don't trust anything until it's actually done. As far as Wallstrom, I think it would be wise for him. Now he's been injured, so we can see that if he has another bad season or two, a prove it deal's tough. So he might be trying for something cheap and somewhat long term. Long term meaning 3 years or 4 years, and just saying, "I'll take 2 mil and let's just go." Um, I'll prove it. He scored 32 goals in 161 games so far. Last season he had 16 points in 35 games, which isn't nothing, but I think a lot of them were in bunches. So he's not consistent to say the least. And I think I said he had scored 5 goals a bunch of times. He scored 7 goals. The year before was 13. The year before was 12. Before that, he's having cups of coffee here and there. I wouldn't put um, no points in 9 games during the COVID year, the shortened COVID year on him at all. Um, just he was up and down or whatever. But in the playoffs a couple years ago, he had 3 points in 5 games. Sorry, I'm just like reading stats today, but eh, I just don't see it yet. He's a lot of positional issues I think he needs to work out. He doesn't really have that killer instinct. He has the shot, but defensively and offensively, just making sure he's in the right place all the time or most of the time. He's just playing with Barzell. You should just make yourself available everywhere. And I don't think he was able to do that. So I think that hurts. I think they believe in him because of the way that he can shoot the puck, but he needs to do a little bit more. So anything under $3 million, I wouldn't be surprised at. Just to give him like a little bit of a higher bar. Um, if he does stay a little bit longer term, just to like feel like he got something out of it. But I think at this point, contract's up. He's been injured. He sees what that other side looks like not playing. He might just try to get 3 years, 4 years at $2 million. Keep it simple. Earn your spot and you'll get signed. Like Lemrel pays his guys, so you have to respond. So sign your 3x2 or whatever. No, you're not buying anyone a team dinner yet, but you'll get there. You'll get your money.
I tend to agree. I don't think it's going to be anything long term, 1 or 2 years max.
Oh,
You
really?
know, a- a-
Not even
y-
not even more than two. Like
yeah, no,
years
I
two.
think it's going to be something short, 1 or 2. What do you got, kid? And then we'll take it from there. Again, given what the salary cap situation looks like, you know, eh, both sides might want to say, let's keep it short. I'm okay with just making $1 million this year or $2 million this year, and making more next year because I think both sides want short term lower dollars for their own reasons. Um, and all of that has to do with the future from both aspects. Wallstrom wanting to bet on himself, but also the Islanders wanting to limit how much money they're spending on certain players lower in the depth chart next year so that they can pay some guys higher in the depth chart. Um okay, Pierre LeBrun, this brings us to Pierre LeBrun's report or reporting earlier today. He said he would not be surprised if we see a 2-year deal for Semyon Varlamov and the Islanders. Any surprises here from you? He's not surprised, but are you?
No, I think I've been saying that for the last month or so since the end of the season. I think Varlamov's an Islander. Um, the UFA market is shit. They don't have any. They're not going to give up assets that they need for other positions to get a goalie. I don't even know who that would even be at this point. It As long as Varlamov's comfortable playing 25, 30 games, and I really wish it was closer to 30 just to give Sorokin the break. If you're going to ride him down the stretch, you really need to deploy them 1A, 1B during the season. Ride the hot goalie that gives you the best chance to win on any given night. And that's going to be Sorokin when you need it. Um, but on back to backs, there's no reason for it. Play Varlamov, get him in there. Um, Mike said last week that he was very confused about Varlamov getting that shutout in Winnipeg and then just kind of seemingly been put on the shelf for the rest of the season, and not really given another look. And, Sorokin pulled them the rest of the way, but there had to have been a chance to rest him and get him ready for the first round if they really thought they were going to make it. Instead, they just rode him until the very last minute, and they needed it to a degree. But I think Varlamov could have just as well gotten them, win or two along the way. He played much better this season, and the team was better in front of him this season. But no, I'm not surprised at all. 2 year, $2 million, I think is fine. Maybe 2.5. Um, if that money, that extra 500,000 works. I've been saying that for a while. I think that works for me. I don't know who. Do you have another idea of who another goalie might even be? I think we've
No.
gone over this list before.
Yeah, no. If anything, it was going to be someone cheap. Like Mackenzie Blackwood's on the market. Can they maybe, for some reason, trade for him? Maybe Thomas Grice reunion, something like that. But
He's been
none of
so
it really.
bad, and he's old. Like Grice
Yeah,
is like 37.
yeah. Like even Yara Halak's out there. Maybe a reunion with him. But like it's all just not good. Like none of it is. And if you want to get into the quote unquote upper echelon of goaltenders who are available, like Tristan Jarry's out there, but are you gonna like risk
He's
signing?
terrible.
Yeah, like it's not that he's terrible. He's good when he's like healthy, but he's never healthy. So that's the problem.
I
And
guess so, but I've
um,
seen him play. He's in the playoffs a few years ago. He
yeah,
was a
no, I hear you.
disaster against the Islanders. He's not getting better since
Right.
then. Like, and that was 18, 19, and that's 5 years ago. He's not getting better.
Yeah.
And he down the stretch when the Penguins needed to win against the Blackhawks, he lets in that he was facing the goal line, and they bounce a puck off of him. Um, yeah, I don't think I don't know who he's an option for, right? And
Right.
doesn't
So
mean he can't resurrect it, but he's just like a skeleton out there waving around. It's terrible.
yeah, the thing is, like, they're buying their own free agent. That's what they're doing, right? You're gonna go to the free agent market. Well, who's gonna be out there? Semyon Varlamov, right? If you're not paying him anything more than 2.5 million bucks, maybe he gets three. But I don't know. I feel like Lamorello's like on a roll here. He's signing some pretty good deals. I
Two by
feel
two would
like
be great.
I'm good with 2 by 2. I'm good by 2 by 2.5. That works for me too. So definitely no surprises here. I mean, especially too because he said after the season, like, I love it here. I know my role was quote unquote decreased, but I don't plan on going anywhere else. And he was straightforward with that. That was
Yeah,
exactly what he said.
I
So
he's the best goalie available. I really don't think there's a reason to kind of think about that more. That's
yeah,
the least surprising thing.
no, yeah,
And this might simply be because he's probably the best UFA goalie available. And if you're not hearing him talk to anybody else, and we've tried to make this guess before, but in this case, there's a lot kind of that we know about Varlamov. I think he's an Islander. I don't think he's going anywhere. He said it. I think the team likes him. Sorokin in particular. He's bounced back last season. He didn't play as much when that's a different problem, but um, if they can kind of get that straightened out and figure out Sorokin's workload a little bit better. Um, Back to Barzell's comment to just have the team be better early, so that you don't have to squeak into the playoffs at the end. You're you're a little more comfortable and you can deploy both goalies. You have the luxury of doing that and resting your top goalie for the playoffs even a little bit. If you're sitting more comfortably in, say, February, it's a different conversation. I'm not saying in by a long shot where they're leading the division or something, but where you can play your backup goalie and it's not a problem, right? And we've seen Varlamov get shutouts against teams, play really well against really good teams, especially in the West, um, where obviously he has a lot more experience than Sorokin. Um, I think it's only a good thing that reunion is nearly inevitable. If there's anything inevitable about Lammerl, I think this one's it.
and it's true to his nature. He likes to build his teams from the net out, and he's not gonna veer off too far from that idea. Nassibin Hockey is brought to you by DraftKings. Light the lamp during the hockey playoffs with DraftKings Sportsbook. New customers can make a $5 bet and score $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN at DraftKings Sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Massachusetts, call 800-327-5050 or visit gamblinghelpma.org. In New York, call 877-8-HOPENY or text HOPENY. In Kansas, call 1-800-522-4700. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, 21 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details and state-specific responsible gambling resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/hockey terms. Let's talk a little bit about Josh Bailey now. Something I
More?
thought of, yeah, a little more. Just because something happened today, unrelated to the Islanders, but in one thing happening in my mind, it sparked another transaction down the road that could possibly happen. Look, there's no secret the Islanders are looking to ship Bailey out. It does feel like the end of the road here for him on Long Island. We've said this over and over again. We don't really need to rehash the whole thing. Um, but the Coyotes placed Zach Cassian and Patrick Nemeth on unconditional waivers today for the purpose of a buyout. They're going to save some money, right? Yes, the Coyotes are on the record saying that they want to be more competitive next season, but did they just make room for a guy like Josh Bailey? Say what you will about his game, but every team needs veterans. That's my take on it. You have a young team that's looking to be more serious about their future, looking to be more serious about the product on the ice. Like, could he not at least play third or fourth line minutes on a Coyotes team and serve as a veteran leader in Arizona?
It's possible. Um, the Coyotes are over $10 million below the cap floor.
They need bodies, right? They got
They
rid
need
of
a warm body, and that can be Josh Bailey. I think he can do better than Andrew Ladd did in Arizona and actually contribute kind of in some way and maybe even play with a chip on his shoulder. Mike really got on my head last week about the whole thing, and it really sucks feeling like you're treating him some way. And I've not been kind to him over the years. You can look up my articles. I'm owning up to the fact that I've been on the hating Josh Bailey train. I think I wish now in retrospect, I wish it would have just happened sooner so that now it hurts. As Leboff said, I think now it actually hurts to see him go because he's not playing well. It's the end of an era. It was so tumultuous. He proved it. He didn't prove it. Um, it just the whole thing stinks. Um, However, if you can make that deal, other teams have done way worse shit, way worse. From everything that Vegas did, just being absolutely cutthroat. Eventually, it paid off 6 years into their existence. You see what the Kings did. Quick was furious. Other teams have done it. Sometimes it's the end of the line. You have to do it. Look at with DiPietro. That was so. Looking back on that, that's such a awful situation because he was so good. Like he had it. There could have really been something there. He was eccentric and unorthodox, and there was at the time. I think that was just what was happening in the NHL with goaltenders. They were just trying to just make something work, but it sucks to see another era of Islanders hockey kind of come to an end with his departure. But at the same time, if you can save $5 million and open up the roster spot, open up the cap, it's possible. I don't think the Arizona Coyotes did that, and now they're thinking, "Oh, we can sign somebody," but they do need to do it. I think you're absolutely right. Um, the Islanders could be the partner in that. Lamoriello did that with Ladd, right? It's not exactly the same situation, but it's a cap dump in a lot of respects, and there's a relationship there. I don't remember who the GM was at the time. because I don't know what the hell's going on in Arizona in general, but Lamorilla didn't lose their phone number. I think he could probably figure something out. So I think that's a way to go. I don't know what other team needs a third or fourth line left winger. He's not exactly Jason Spezza like on Toronto, right? It's not going to add like really really good value. He can't kill penalties. Maybe he can help your a younger second power play unit somewhere if you really really need the help. Maybe that's in Anaheim. Um, I'm not sure. I mean, look, you could here's some galaxy branding for you. Trotz might like him as like a leader thing, fourth line.
True.
Like I don't know what their any of their situation is at all. I can't even pretend to understand what their cap situation is and what Trotz walked into necessarily.
Okay, so I could actually speak on this because I wrote about it today. They are at like about 15.5 million bucks in available cap space. They have no major contracts to re-sign. I know that there's the possibility that they might be shopping UC Soros. The thing that Barry Trotz wants to do is inject more offense into the lineup. He wants more offensive flair. If anything, that's all Josh Bailey brings is a little bit of offense. He's a liability literally everywhere else.
Yeah.
So maybe it does, maybe it doesn't benefit him. I'm gonna go with the latter though. I'm gonna go with he's probably aware enough to know that Bailey's not the right player for what he's trying to build
I
in
think that's
Nashville.
like I said, I'm galaxy branding here. And remember with their 15 mil or 15.5 million dollars in cap space, Philip Forsberg is on IR on cap friendly. So that's only half of that. Plus whoever they had to resign. So they might not have been able to even fit him. Like I said, I didn't look before I said that. It was the top of my head. But yeah, you just gotta think. I don't know what teams are actually cash strapped. He's only owed $3.5 million. His AAV is 5 or 5.5 or whatever it is. So I think it's actually just a clean 5 mil. So the teams that are more cash strapped, that's appealing to them. They can help them reach the cap floor without actually having to pay. Um, I'm not sure what those teams are other than Arizona. I don't know what Chicago really looks like as far as the dollars and cents are concerned. Anaheim is likely at the closer to the bottom of what they have space. Yeah, they have a ton of space, and no one on IR that's worth much. So that could be somewhere like there, and um, they have a 27. Their forwards average age is 27. Adam Henrique has 1 year left at almost 6 million. Jacob Silverberg is 5.25. They're both 33 and 32. They both have a year left at 5. So if they bring on Josh Bailey next season, Anaheim has $15 million off the book, with Ryan Strome being the only player other than Cam Fowler and John Gibson making over $5 million or $5 million or more. So they'd be in a good spot. Like it's not tying up a ton of money. It's only 1 year for Bailey, so that's good. Um, so maybe Anaheim, maybe that makes sense, something like that. Um, I don't know what their plans are. I haven't heard a whole lot, so it could mean a lot of places. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, I just feel like, that's the land where all players go to retire. I know that the Coyotes are trying to turn a new leaf and not be that team. But listen, if the shoe fits and you need veterans in that lineup, and his real dollars owed versus cap hit is actually less. So that's a good situation for what they actually have to pay him versus what's on their salary. Like it's a total, like it's a perfect storm in my opinion for Bailey to go there. Like I know, again, like I said, I know the joke is like, oh, just trade him to Arizona, but this one actually makes sense. But off the top of your head, can you think of any other destinations that might make sense for a guy like Bailey? That's not Europe, by the way. I don't know if you're going to joke about that.
That's no, I no. I mean, every team thinks they can make it in the offseason, right? Every team Stanley Cup champion 2024. So even if they're at the bottom of the cap list on cap friendly or something, um, there's been some turnover in GM land kind of around. Um, I can't picture Pittsburgh wanting to get older. That doesn't make sense. Um, Especially trading in with a division rival to make them better. So that takes out the entire Metro, probably the whole East, unless maybe Columbus, but I don't know what their plan is. They don't have a ton of room, so that doesn't strike me as something that would actually work. They just brought on Provorov, so they're quote trying to get better. Um, I don't. I'm not exactly sure. I don't know what teams around the league think of Josh Bailey. I know what we think, but I don't know what executives think. It's hard because Carolina has a ton of space, but they're really good. You don't need Josh Bailey. Um, Maybe as a 13th forward, 14th forward. I'm not entirely sure. Um, Detroit's trying to I think, try to stay young. They don't need Josh Bailey. Um, so I think I don't think it's as easy of a task as people think. Um, the Flyers might take a pick for him. Bailey in a second or a third, and they just take him for nothing in return, or something, some AHL player or some kind of depth piece. Um, and that's in a division, but the Flyers aren't going to be very good. I don't know if Danny Briere knows uh, Lamorello at all. I don't think they crossed over anywhere necessarily, but that could be something. Um, Again, Flyers 1 year. It's not going to hurt long term. $5 million, only owe 3.5. Fine. Um, so that might also work. I can't think of anything more specific than that, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said this before. I wonder about a team like Chicago who is looking to maybe surround Connor Bedard by some veterans. Maybe you said earlier, maybe in Anaheim, looking to surround uh, you know, those young players with some veterans. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Their only other options are buying him out, which the buyout window just opened. They did not buy him out, and I think that's a calculated move to see what the market is going to be, and there will be a second buyout window, so it's not going to happen right now. Or you bury him in the minors, but I think they save more money by buying him out, albeit longer term. But I do think that they save more money buying him out.
I think that's a bet you make if you think the cap's going to go up. And again, I'm not totally sure on that, but if you think the cap's going to go up and you're going to buy them out, sure, just do it.
Right,
Like,
right.
move on from the deal, add your $2 million and call it. Right. I think at a certain point, Bailey, and again, as hard as the Clutterbuck, Martin, Bailey, some of these players kind of sticking around for a long time and taking up money on the cap, as much as that's going to hurt to see them go, however they go, just rip the Band-Aid off. It's like the Coliseum. Like, it just eventually, I don't want to talk about this anymore. Eventually, we just have to move on. It can't be a topic of conversation anymore. We just have to take the step forward and kind of never look back, unless, in the future, like, we just, like, don't need to think about it. No one's talking about the Coliseum anymore unless it's, very random little thing memories on Twitter. And that's good, right? There's no arena problems. There's no, bullshit. I think it's the same thing with this, where it's going to stink for an era to end, but an era's going to end. I think that's just what it is.
Well said. With that being said, it's early because obviously there's the rest of the summer. We have to see what the moves are to be made. Um, do you- look, before I actually ask you this next question, let me on the fly here, off script. Don't mind me. Do you
Boo.
expect anything to happen this summer that is like, let's call it a quote unquote major impact?
I hope so, but I don't know what that would look like. I think that's the nature of trades. UFAs, you can get your hopes up for. We can, like, obviously, we have a little bit of experience with that. but you can like you see the name out there or names or whatever, and you can kind of your mouth starts watering. You start playing armchair GM and cap friendly. How much can you sign for how long, and who they play with, and all this kind of stuff, and roster construction. And then you put these expectations on the team, and you just kind of like ride that into the end of November, and they stink anyway, and yada yada. But I think it's so much harder to see it in a trade because it is all made up until something happens. You can make up trade scenarios and you try your best to make them somewhat logical so that it's not like, oh, Bailey and Ross Johnston for Clayton Keller from Arizona. See ya. And we make out like no, that's not a thing that's going to happen. Don't try to put it out and make it into existence so that it happens. Like that's just not something that realistic. Um, I don't know what that even looks like for the Islanders as far as a big impact move. Um, for the most part, I like the team. They have some holes they need to fill. I'm not sure. What do you where are you on that? Because like I said, I think it's just hard for me to wrap my head around
Yeah.
who's available, who have they kicked the tires on already? Are they an RFA? DeBrincat seems like somebody, obviously, but everyone wants DeBrincat, like everyone wanted Goudreau. Um, like anyone's gonna want any really good player and at least try to figure out what they're worth. Like I'm not sure how you begin to have that thought process.
Yeah, I wonder, you know, I don't know how they're going to compete with some of the possible trade scenarios that could go down, right? But there's a lot of players on the market right now reportedly available, and I'm just going to pull up the trade watch list um via the fourth period, because as I was scrolling through, I was like, you know what? Like this is a lot of names for the summer where, like we said, the UFA market is not good. But let's just talk about the first few. Pierre Luc Dubois, Alex DeBrinket, Mark Scheifele, and we're just going to talk forwards here. Kevin Hayes, Scott Lawton, Evgeny Kuznetsov, JT Miller, Kelly Yamamoto, Josh Bailey's on there, Adam Henrique, Blake Wheeler, Alex Iafallo, who, by the way, scored 40 goals last year. Okay. Um, Ross Colton's a really good name. I don't think he's a top six forward for the Islanders, but Travis Konechny is out there. Lawson Krause, Connor Garland, like Victor Olofsson. Victor, remember when a couple of years ago I was talking about Victor Olofsson and all that guy does is score goals? Like you've said this well said before. Maybe all they need is a one-dimensional player who just
Is a
scores
power play
goals.
guy.
Power
He
play
was
guy,
killing
just
the Islanders.
just knows how to fill the net, right? Why not? Why not just load up on a guy like that? Um, so it's I wanna I'm inclined to believe that with all of these names out there, and again, another thing that you've said well, this is Lamoriello's specialty is to make a trade rather than sign a free agent. This could be the summer of Lou. This could be the summer where he decides that he's gonna he's gonna dip his hand in the summer activity and make that impact trade and go into next season with a full year rather than a couple of months of a Bo Horvat edition, right? Now maybe this summer, whoever it is, he does it from the get-go.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too because you don't know what other teams' plans are, and a team like Vegas that is always on offloading players and bringing people in, and other teams might be doing the same. And like somebody that's good, that it might just be time for them to move on from them. And the Islanders might be a beneficiary of that for a change. I'm not talking about getting an injured player like a Pacioretty, but that would have been a pretty good deal, for the Islanders to get somebody like that. So with all different, everyone's trying to get under the cap and try to make the best deals and open up some room and this and that. You never know who is on the other end of that phone call that is trying to make their team better. But first they need to get rid of somebody, right? They need to painfully get rid of a player. And not like a Josh Bailey, but somebody really good, like Winnipeg Jets. They might just say it's time and um, depending on if they have a player has a no move, the Islanders might be on that list. They might not be on that list. Um, and the player has a lot of say in where they go. And yeah, I think it's hard to say. Like I said, I just don't know. You don't know what other teams are thinking, what they need to do, and what their situation is, who they need to re-sign. Other RFAs like, all right, we can't lose this guy for nothing. He's going to go to arbitration. He's going to do this. He's not going to re-sign. He's going to hold out. Let's just get something for him, and just get this out of here. Um, you don't know what a team like Toronto's going to do where those some of those guys need to be moved before the first if they're going to be moved and no trade clauses kick in. Um, they certainly don't want to lose anybody for nothing. I don't know what Carolina's situation is. They seem to have, pretty healthy culture where people want to stick around. It's a lot like Boston, but I don't know. I don't know what any of that looks like right now. I think I'm excited. I'm not trying to get too worked up about it in case
Yeah.
nothing happens, but signs of the past kind of point to this is like I said, like you said, like I said, this could be the summer of Lou simply just because it's a trade market kind of summer.
Yeah, it's a good point. That being said, right, does that set up maybe tell me with those expectations and without those expectations, what are your expectations for next year? The
I'm not
2023-24 season. Let me just be more specific.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I'm kind of in a middle ground area with this team. Um, they made the playoffs last year after a down year. They didn't really play well. They had some injuries. I think it's a lot like going into last season, where maybe medium expectations, low to medium expectations, but high hopes.
Okay.
Um, Talk to me midway through November about where the team's at and what the moves that they make. And because we've seen the Boychuk and Letty kind of thing happen really really late, and that seemed really unexpected at the time. Different era, 10 years ago, and all that. You can make any tell, don't remind me I was there. I don't, you don't need to, I know the story. But moves can happen from tomorrow to days before the season. They can happen during the season through the trade deadline. I'm obviously not saying anything crazy here, but as we've seen, the trade deadline seems to be Lamorello's kind of place. He wants to see how his team's going to shake out. I do think something needs to happen this summer. Like there's, I don't know, it would be absolute insanity to just like run this team back the same way, knowing the pieces that you're missing, knowing that Lambert just struggled and got out coached in the playoffs and during the regular season for the most part, just not being able to get his players together, not being able to kind of switch it up and deploy them differently. Um, so I think medium expectations and high hopes. I think just as being a fan, you want them to do well, so your hopes are high. But realistically, it's a prove it year for me, right? Is this team Did this team have 2 down years and they made some trades and they're retooling and gonna make a run for it? Or are we waiting for the clock to run out on some players that Bailey's gonna be gone, Martin's gonna be gone, Clutterbuck's gonna be gone, then it's gonna be Lee and Nelson not too far beyond that, and it's just, yep, by the end of Barzell's contract, they might have a chance at being better, or at the end of Horvat's contract, but it's gonna be shit. We're not gonna rebuild, but we're gonna retool. We're gonna be an 8, 9, 10 team. We're gonna be a one and out team for half a decade, and that might just be it. And like we asked last week, this is not the same team that made the conference finals 2 years in a row. We need to kind of readjust where we're at. We're we're not even after the 18-19 season where they just won the first round and lost in the second, right? They really had something there. There was clearly something different about this team. This is pre-Barry kind of Lou era expectations and things where we really don't know who they are. They have to prove it all over again. They have not shown that they're the same team as 2 years ago. So who are they going to be? Who are they going to evolve into next? I'm not saying it needs to be this huge shift, but they need to be more. They need to be more something. They need to be more anything, frankly. They didn't have an identity last season. So I don't really know where I land on that. And I'm curious what you think. I don't know if it would shift my thinking at all, but yeah, um, I'm not so sure.
It's it's always interesting to have this conversation because we're so used to the true definition of insanity, which is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And look, maybe that doesn't apply, right? Because players evolve, right? Maybe this is one of those situations where you can't do the same thing over and over again because every season the player comes or the players come back and they're a little bit different somehow, right? Maybe some
Wallstrom
get a
could
little
be a
bit
30 goal
better.
scorer all of a sudden.
Correct, right? So some could be a little better, some could be a little worse. That being said, you know, it's hard to imagine that without any true game breakers, how much better can this team be, right? I think of Frank Saravalli's he did this player archetype series with each team and how many, or not even each team, how many true franchise players there are in the NHL. And the Islanders only had one in Ilya Sorokin, whereas the true legitimate Stanley Cup threats had like two at least,
I'd like to
among
point out
other
that
elite players.
I'd like to point out Barzell not on that list.
Barzell was not on that list.
And and
Um,
and he's I'm one of his bigger critics, I think. Um, you and
you
I have
have
had the
been for sure,
you and I have had that debate where I do not think he's elite. He has the tools to do it. He has
yeah,
not shown it. He showed it for 1 year.
right. So, and look, I understandable. I think that we have different um outlooks on why that is. I know you're of the belief that if he's the elite type of player that he claims to be, or people claim him to be, that he would take over games. I'm on the other side of that, where I think that he's just not equipped enough to be able to, have the attention drawn off of him. But for the
You
sake of
gotta
the
evolve.
argument,
You just have to evolve, and he's
for
just shown he's the only player doing something different, and it's not help with the team. You have to figure something out, man. You can't
right,
just keep doing the same thing, complain about your line mates. While that is true, what are you good players elevate anybody. I'm not saying Barzell can be Sidney Crosby, but look at him. Crosby's played with absolute nobodies. Who was Jake Gensel before Pittsburgh? No one.
right,
Who was Evan
right.
Rodriguez before that? You know what I mean? Like
And
you're talking
I'm
about
here. I'm here for that conversation. I'm here for
here's the
that.
difference.
But
Here's the difference.
okay,
Tavares did that, right? Pull up Google Maps, show me where I'm wrong. He did that with players that were nobody, right?
okay,
And Brad Boys, PA Prento, Opozo was good, but he took him to a different level. Um, Molson, I don't know if I said that. You're talking about 3 or 4 players here that Josh Bailey, right?
yeah.
You're talking about a lot of players that he lifted up over a long period of time, and he was also good. He was also a 35 plus goal scorer. He was also 60, 70, 80 points a season. So you can not like that take. You can think Barzell's better than Tavares, all that you want. You can talk about playoff series, and all that stuff is very important. But at the end of the day, Barzell is not making the players around him better. The team as a whole is playing better than Tavares in Toronto. Sure. Sure. They have over since Tavares has left, the Islanders have been better. Fine. As far as the first lines go or their lines go, that's the difference. Now Tavares is declining. He's also like 10 years older, nearly 10 years older than Barzell. So it's different. But I think that's the important part here. Who are the players lifting up their lines and other players in the team, regardless of who they are, and who are
Yeah.
the players that aren't? There's a distinct difference there.
Yeah, I hear you. I do. Um, Regardless, the conversation is about, can the Islanders be any better without true elite talent? I get it. You look at what the Seattle Kraken did last off season, or not too long ago. Eliminating the Colorado Avalanche, and they play by committee. They roll 4 lines, but they're also a lot younger. I know they have Jordan Eberle is there, a former Islander, obviously, taken in the expansion draft, this, and that, and the other thing. But the fact of the matter is that I just think that their committee is a little bit different than the committee that the Islanders have right now, who are a little bit older and a lot slower. Um, whereas the Kraken have a rising superstar and a young Matty Beniers. They have a 24-year-old defenseman who just recorded 64 points in Vince Dunn. The outlook is different. You might look at Noah Dobson and be like, oh, well, he had a 50-point season last season. Yeah, he did, but he's got some issues himself to resolve. Vince Dunn was being talked about as a possible Norris Trophy candidate. They weren't
And
saying that about Noah Dobson.
Dobson kind of petered off there at the end
Right.
of the after December or so.
Right. So I don't know how much the play by committee thing works anymore for this group. They need another superstar. I know that they got Bo Horvat. I still think they need another winger, and I don't think that they should be done trying to get those guys just yet. We'll see what the offseason brings if they can be part of the what seems like might be a trade frenzy um this summer, given the UFA market. But with that said, um, my expectations for this year are exactly what they were last year. Bubble playoff team. Maybe they can make it. Maybe maybe they don't. Wouldn't be surprised either way. At best, first round exit. At worst, they miss.
Yeah, and I think that'll be kind of what the general expectations are, even outside of Islanders country. That I think the narrative around the team will shift. That they're no longer a team that all they need to do is make it.
Yeah,
I think last year has changed that, and hopefully that means that the team is going to come in with a chip on their shoulder. They clearly need something to play for, kind of beyond the hockey of it all. I don't know
yeah,
if they just need drama. They're just that type of culture that they need to kind of team up against something. But it is very clear that just the game isn't enough. Like they need to play with a little bit of animosity against something. They need to be directed at something. Um, and it's not the media, because the media, that clearly didn't move the needle for them last year. So, or the last 2 years. So they need to they kind of need to get their shit together there.
yeah. Um, a final note, and then we'll end the show here, John. But another former Islander, is set to join the Rangers bench with Peter Laviolette. We actually didn't even talk about this first. Initial reaction on Peter Laviolette signing on as the New York Rangers head coach, and additional reaction to Michael Pekka joining him as an assistant.
It's interesting. You don't want to see, Pekka and Laviolette teamed up in for the Islanders in the early 2000s. For those of you who remember, and it was great. It's tough to kind of see them both. I don't know that it's going to make a huge difference in the Rangers. I don't know that Laviolette is a huge change from someone like Gallant. Um, the Ranger fans that I talk to tend to think that Gallant got outcoached um, against the Devils and just never adjusted. The Devils just changed what they were doing, and then that was the end of it. Um, so I think it's a wait and see for them. I don't know what kind of expectations the Ranger fans have on their team this year, considering some of the changes that they're going to go through and some of the star power that they don't have going into this season. They did going into the playoffs. How some of that didn't work out, the assets that they lost. So I'm not really sure what their roster looks like in general. It's definitely a mix. They have an older core, a lot like the Islanders. Um, Panarin, Zibanejad, Kreider, now Trocheck, and they're all locked up for another 3 years. It's not like 3 or 4 years. So and some of them longer. Um, Filipino's young. Barclay Goudreau is 30 years old. They don't have a lot of players locked up. They only have 8 forwards. They have five. Wait, yeah, they have 8 forwards right now. And they have a bunch of UFAs and some different things. But so I don't know what that roster is going to look like next year. I don't know if Pekka and Laviolette move the needle. But it stinks because Pekka was one of those players. I don't know that he got his due after he retired with the Islanders, as far as like alumni stuff and really being appreciated by the team. Um, I think it'd be tough for a guy like Yashin to do that. Certainly Laviolette didn't get much love from the team following that, although I think fans were really disappointed and confused at that time. I think I even saw a quote that Pekka was confused after following that when Milbury fired him. So that era, and you can go listen to to Dan and Mike kind of go through some of those things, and we do occasionally here, but yeah, like that era was so tumultuous, even when they were good, like quote good and getting better and making the playoffs here and there, before just kind of falling off all over again. Um, so it's tough to kind of see them team back up, and in theory they can do something kind of nice, and we'll see. But I think there's some bigger problems above their head that the team needs to figure out. Um, it's more fun when both teams are good. The games are always good, I think, regardless, but and
Yeah.
entertaining. But it's fun when they're both good and there's something to lose on both sides instead of just pride. Although they don't play very much anymore, which is really disappointing. They
No,
played
3
3
times
times
last
last
year,
year.
like,
Yeah,
whatever.
by like October 3rd, and they played 3 times already. You're like, okay, great.
Sick.
No, yeah, stupid, but yeah, wild to see. Pekka is apparently the second captain that I read. Was Brian Trache one of their coaches at one point? Am I
He was
making that
behind their
up?
bench, yeah. No, he was.
So that's just like hard to wrap your head around. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's uh it's wild to kind of see his name kind of back in New York. That's probably the first weird thing, and then seeing him in a Rangers anything is gonna be weird.
Yeah, I think it's the right move for the Rangers, if I'm being honest. I don't think Gallant and Laviolette are too similar. I think Gallant was a yes man. He liked to make be on everybody's good side. He didn't really light any fires under any asses there, and I think that Laviolette can definitely do that. So, I think that's just one of the I think it's one of the bigger factors as to why they brought him in. Um, but yeah, just in general, I think that of any of the available coaches, this was probably the right choice. So I guess we'll see.
I mean, it's a tro I don't know what other options are, so I think that's just it. I think that's the end.
Yeah, we shall see. But I think that about wraps it up for tonight, pal. What say you?
I think so. We did a little bit more than an hour here. Again, we didn't think we were gonna have a lot to say, but we always do. But yeah, I can wrap it up.
Take us home.
Please rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen to or watch the show. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Aspen Hockey. You can find James' work at New Jersey Hockey Now and the Fourth Period, and check out Isles Fix, an excellent curated Islanders newsletter, where I got the quote today from Lambert back in February, to give Mr. Bono some credit for some of our content here
Yeah,
this evening.
yeah. New
Bring us home,
Jersey
buddy.
Hockey Now. New Jersey Hockey Now is correct. Where, believe it or not, pal, I wrote an article while doing this episode because some news dropped that I
Oh,
had
I
to
know.
kind of get out.
Oh, I know. I saw your eyes all
But
over the
hey,
place.
I kept it together. Not bad, huh? Not
I
bad.
think so. As taking the lead, I think you did an okay job here.
This is the life of a beat reporter, and I'm living it. But until next time, all, let's go Islanders.